Hazmat crews and DEA agents are sifting through a home in Claremont after officials say meth and fentanyl were found inside. Multiple people have been detained. ABC 10 News reports.
Washington, D.C., 8:47 in the morning, the Senate corridor suddenly exploded into chaos. It was not an attack from the outside, but a lightning FBI raid on the office of Senator Marcus Hale. Inside agents discovered the unbelievable 2 tons of fentanyl heroin and $11.6 million in cash. This was not ordinary bribery. This was the deepest cartel infiltration ever uncovered, a $14.7 billion narco empire shielded by national security clearance codes themselves. Marcus Hale was not merely a corrupt official, he was the mastermind of the Meridian syndicate. Today we expose the full truth about the Iron Corridor and Operation Fracture, the story of a guardian who became the greatest traitor in American political history. This unprecedented multi-agency operation led by the DEA in close coordination with our local, state, tribal, and federal partners targeted one of the largest and most dangerous drug trafficking organizations and foreign threat groups ever to operate within our borders. At exactly 8:47 in the morning in Washington, D.C., a massive seizure took place that included 2 tons of fentanyl and heroin, along with $11.6 million in cash. Most shocking of all was the list of 77 compromised and bribed government officials. This is precisely the deepest infiltration of a criminal cartel into the machinery of the United States government ever uncovered in history. November 19, 2025, Detroit. Just before dawn, FBI and DHS agents swept into the operations wing of Detroit Metropolitan Airport, heading straight for the office of 46-year-old airport director Evelyn Markham. What they found erased any doubt she wasn't serving Michigan, she was serving CJNG. On her desk sat 3 encrypted hard drives loaded with cartel routing codes and more than $72 million in cash. Nearby agents discovered dozens of restricted area passes issued to people with no connection to the airport, many traced directly back to CJNG. The message was unmistakable. This wasn't mere corruption. It was an internal breach at Michigan's largest airport hub, a gang outpost disguised as an airport office, and Evelyn Markham was the one running it. Corridor designed to push Sinaloa. A staffer screamed in panic. Capitol police officers stood frozen in stunned disbelief at the unfolding nightmare. Hale staggered backward just before agents slammed him against the wall with the same cold precision they use when hitting fentanyl superlabs across the Southwest. And his office told the rest of the horror story. Inside room 312, a heavy steel cabinet had been blown open. What spilled out from inside had no business being anywhere near the United States Senate bricks of fentanyl meticulously packaged for mass distribution bundles of heroin stamped with cartel insignia and $11.6 million in cash stacked in neat bricks. Then came the documents, classified memos, routing codes, transportation permits, all not signs of weakness but emblems of command authority. The Senate had not been infiltrated by outsiders. It had been compromised from the very core of its own power. Distribution maps uncovered a direct pipeline from Whitford's shipments to 7 high schools scattered across northern Michigan. Teachers had already reported a sharp spike in methamphetamine and counterfeit pills among students, some as young as 15. Local dealers told undercover agents that product up north was cheap, potent, and always in stock. At the same time, Traverse City had quietly become a dumping ground for out-of-county drug offenders sent there for treatment, a policy loop. What the public believed were military resupply convoys were in fact the backbone of a $14.7 billion narco-trafficking machine shielded by the government's own clearance codes. We now know that the individuals behind this organization, known as the Meridian Syndicate, began operating 2 decades ago. They were forged from former Sinaloa enforcers, Balkan arms traffickers, and disgraced military advisors expelled for war crimes. Their brutality had already become legend in the underworld. Investigative files document 216 disappearances directly tied to the construction of tunnels beneath the Sonoran Desert. Safe houses were equipped with blast-proof doors and chemical dissolution systems capable of erasing all traces of a body in under 11 minutes. Audio recordings captured extreme threats used to control corrupt officials. A revenge massacre in 2019 left 22 people dead. Behind the camera lenses and polished speeches, Hale didn't merely ally with the syndicate, he built its expansion on American soil. 8 years of gathered evidence exposed an industrial-scale operation, 19 high-tech underground tunnels engineered for massive throughput 62 military-grade trucks, registered under fake contractors' courier teams, equipped with encrypted radios, night vision gear, military rifles and fentanyl bricks concealed inside temperature-controlled weapons crates buried deep within the cartel's own communication network. This pipeline had a name, the Iron Corridor, a shadow superhighway engineered to pump drugs and weapons into America's cities without leaving a trace. And every time the DEA tried to intervene, a single token flashed across their screens. Hale 17A cleared instantly. To the public, Marcus Hale was a champion of national security. In raw truth, he commanded the most heavily protected narco pipeline ever constructed inside the United States government itself. Federal agents knew Marcus Hale was the head of this serpent. But no one, not even the most battle-hardened tactical commanders, could have foreseen what happened next on the morning he was arrested, because the instant Hale's fingerprints hit the federal booking system, Phase 2 of the operation ignited. Operation Fracture, the largest coordinated domestic strike since 9/11 officially began. Across 14 states, 3,200 fully kitted federal agents stood ready inside hangars, warehouses, and unmarked parking lots. No badges visible, no leaks to the Press Zero warning. Every wasted minute risked cartel counterattacks or the destruction of critical evidence. The Meridian Syndicate was no ordinary street cartel. It was a militarized narco empire staffed with veterans' armored vehicles, encrypted comms, and perimeter guards trained to drop targets without hesitation. The first battle erupted outside El Paso on the desert fringe where Hale's tunnel surfaced. Helicopter rotors slashed through the freezing air as FBI hostage rescue teams and United States Marshals fast-roped onto a heavily fortified compound disguised as a trucking depot. Infrared drones marked 16 gunmen on rooftops and catwalks. Flashbangs detonated, the compound plunged into chaos, bullets whining steel ringing like church bells. One shooter on the scaffolding dropped before he could reload. Tactical teams behind ballistic shields stormed the main warehouse, finding crates of military carbine suppressors and Meridian-sealed fentanyl. Near the tunnel stairwell, the cartel holdouts tried to dig in, but were wiped out in under 6 minutes. At 5:21 in the morning, the Phoenix Front erupted agents breached the back wall of an auto parts garage and caught a lab in full swing, industrial mixers pressing raw fentanyl into pills. White smoke billowed thick with the screaming metal of rifle fire. K-9 units chased 2 lieutenants through forests of chemical drums. One reached for an igniter to torch the precursors and destroy the lab, but was tackled inches from the flame. The climax came in northern Georgia. The noose tightened around the syndicate's main logistics hub, a maze of semi-trailers ringing a ghost company. As cartel trucks roared toward the east gate, spike strips shredded tires and 2 rigs skidded into the ditch. Gunfire screams, gas grenades rolling under chassis, thermal drones overhead, painting every huddled figure hiding inside the refrigerated warehouse. Two bodies curled beneath pallets of frozen produce, fingers still locked around frost-covered rifles. At 8:03, the fighting stopped, leaving a staggering toll: 2.1 tons of fentanyl and heroin, 412 weapons traced to Hale's own defense contracts, $380 million gold, cash, and crypto wallets, plus 143 suspects in cuffs. The Iron Corridor, once shielded by a senator's signature, was reduced to burning warehouses, collapsed tunnels, and empty trailers. For the first time in 8 years, the Meridian syndicate stopped moving. It was disintegrating. Washington had barely swallowed the shock of the Capitol raid when the second wave hit. How hard does it hit you knowing the clearance code? Hale 17. A protected a $14.7 billion narco pipeline. This time it wasn't on the streets or in cartel dens, it was at the very heart of power in Washington. That morning, the Senate plunged into speechless crisis, a sitting senator in cuffs, an empire collapsing before dawn, the halls of Congress looking more like a wartime command bunker than a legislature. Phones rang off the hook, staffers whispered in shadowed corners, press secretaries ghost-white sprinted past marble columns. Overnight, the man once hailed as the voice of national security had been redrawn by evidence as the final boss of a militarized drug cartel. At 11:04 in the morning, bipartisan leadership was locked inside the secure conference room. For 9 straight hours, the most powerful politicians in America were forced to stare at the full dossier the FBI had silently assembled for over a year. Financial ledgers, encrypted chats tunnel, blueprints, weapons manifests, and clearance codes that had sailed untouched across state lines slid across the table in silence. The sentence repeated in every secure room after secure room was short and chilling. It came from inside the Senate. Shock detonated instantly. 19 senior aides were detained for questioning that same afternoon, 3 of them cuffed in the Capitol courtyard when their laptops revealed donation deposits matching cartel delivery dates. A Chicago communications director sprinted to wipe 6 years of emails the moment the raid broke, but agents intercepted him at the elevator. Across the country, local officials scrambled to wash their hands. Governors raced to microphones with statements of utter shock and full cooperation, while television anchors gasped for breath, chasing every new name that kept dropping. Every link from city councilmen to procurement staff to transportation advisors was welded tight to Hale's clearance network. No amount of coincidence could explain it away. The true political bomb detonated when a classified memo leaked in stark capital letters: Hale guarantees passage. Do not interfere. It wasn't just tacit complicity, it was an open admission that someone had deliberately waved through shipments of drugs and weapons. By late afternoon, protests erupted outside the Capitol, signs everywhere reading, "Who protects us? When the protectors fall, and if the Senate can bend, what won't break?" The air reeked of raw fury, suspicion, and an ice-cold fear the institutions once trusted as unbreakable had proven far more fragile than anyone dared admit. Behind closed doors, Washington reeled. Emergency ethics hearings, fundraising committees dissolved, overnight intelligence chiefs demanding every classified Hale brief be reopened to see what secrets had been sold. For the first time in modern history, the Capitol had to admit what was once treated as impossible. The greatest national security threat of the decade had not come from abroad, but from inside the marble corridors of the Senate itself. The political storm was only the surface. Far beneath it, investigators were peeling away layers of illusion to reveal a structural rot engineered with the precision of a military campaign, durable enough to survive every election audit and oversight cycle. The key was inside an unmarked innocuous folder pulled from Hale's office at 1:27 in the afternoon. On the outside, it looked like routine legislative paperwork, but every page that turned shattered another layer of the Senate's facade. This was the Meridian ledger, the brain of the entire empire, the complete map of political access. Points, clearance codes, payment cycles, transport routes, contingency plans, and names. Everything laid out like a military engineer's playbook. Dates, locations, initials, signatures, routing instructions, and the exact dollar amounts paid to keep every gate wide open. 77 officials were listed inside, not all elected or high-ranking. Some were just mid-level procurement clerks who quietly signed off on federal trucking contracts. A Department of Transportation logistics coordinator, a regional safety inspector, a Senate subcommittee staffer, a media analyst who managed the security cameras. Each was just a tiny lever enough to quietly clear a shipment delay in inspection or misdirect an investigation. But the most shocking list ran deeper. 12 sheriffs, 8 city council members, 3 former military advisors who once sat shoulder to shoulder with Hale on the Defense Committee. They weren't taking old-school bribes. They had melted into the marrow of the state itself, forming a protective web the FBI never imagined. More horrifying, every wire transfer and encrypted memo was paired with a precise action, a rerouted convoy, a skip checkpoint, a vanished report, a camera switched off a clearance code quietly issued. The Meridian Syndicate didn't hide inside the system. It turned the system itself into a weapon. As the details spilled out, communities began to see their pain carried an actual signature. In Chicago, mothers burying children lost to fentanyl recognized clearance orders bearing Hale's mark. In Phoenix, cops discovered pursuit logs altered not by mistake, but by suppression orders handed down from above. In El Paso, activists who had long suspected finally held black and white proof: the tunnels, the routes, the trucks, the protection. Across America, grief hardened into rage, and rage crystallized into a crushing realization. This was not the failure of one man, but of an entire chain of hands that together operated the machine, poisoning the nation. In the cramped evidence room, one analyst whispered what everyone feared. If a single senator could build an empire like this, what else is quietly running in the dark we still haven't seen? That question ricocheted through agencies, cloakrooms, and newsrooms because the betrayal in the Meridian ledger wasn't measured in money, guns, or drugs. It was measured in national trust, shattered beyond silent repair. By the end of the week, America was different: outwardly intact flags still flying, Congress still in session, but something essential inside had snapped. Marcus Hale hadn't merely corrupted the system, he had proven how easily it could be weaponized from the marrow out. The collapse rolled forward quietly, hundreds of simultaneous arrests across 23 jurisdictions accounts. Frozen servers seized every transportation network that had unknowingly hauled for Meridian locked down tight. By Friday afternoon, 641 financial accounts, including offshore shells disguised as humanitarian and defense funds, were frozen by federal order. The Justice Department unsealed the first wave of indictments, 184 individuals, from senior advisors to mid-level bureaucrats with bland titles who quietly held the crucial keys. Every federal agency stunned as their own were walked out in cuffs. Congress slid from skepticism into panic. Senate offices shuttered and silent, the Ethics Committee and emergency session intelligence teams combing every document Marcus Hale had ever touched for whatever else he had sold. On the streets of Chicago, crowds ringed the federal courthouse signs raised high. How many lives did Hale's pen sign away, and when a senator builds a cartel who still protects the law? For many communities, the scandal only confirmed what they had long suspected: the devastation of their neighborhoods was never random. It had been quietly approved and covered up by the very people empowered to stop it. All the while, Marcus Hale chose silence. As he was walked from holding to arraignment through a thicket of shouted questions, he kept his head down. No denials, no outrage, just a quiet stare at the floor as though accepting the collapse of his empire. The fallout spread wide. Defense contractors faced supply chain audits, border stations rewrote protocols, entire divisions of the Department of Transportation were suspended. Judges reopened old sentences, and schools, hospitals, and community groups finally connected years of stalled grants to the names on the syndicate's payroll. The Dana Whitford story delivers a bone-chilling lesson. The most dangerous corruption isn't the gunfire or the duffel bags of bribe money, but the seemingly harmless signatures on clearance forms, the schedule changes just to be more efficient, the charity donations to the local schools. One single person parked in the right seat of power patient for years can turn a tourist harbor into a narco gateway and schools into drug markets without anyone noticing until it's too late. The vulnerability isn't out on some distant border, it's right inside the blind belief that it can't happen here. Keep asking questions, keep verifying, because silence itself is complicity. Power and greed intersect. And for the first time, federal agents privately admitted what they had begun to suspect. The CJNG network in Texas wasn't collapsing, it was only now being exposed. If this shocked you, comment, "Stop the network so more people see what agents uncovered." When federal agents sealed the servers and marked them with the red national security tag, the message was unmistakable. Dying breath of a crumbling empire, no one could say for certain. But one truth was undeniable. The man who had quietly handed an entire major American city to CJNG was finally in handcuffs. Of 77 officials shocks you the most? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Your voice is the light that breaks that silence.